I'm Mr. McBrien. This is SNC2P, the circulatory system. So the circulatory system has the basic function of circulating blood through your body. Hello, I'm Mr. McBrien. This is SNC2P, the circulatory system. So this is the classic view of the circulatory system, showing how blood is moved throughout our body. And we're going to talk about this in some detail, both why it happens and how it happens. Now, one of the most basic functions of blood we've already seen. It carries oxygen from the lungs and nutrients from the intestines to the cells. And so we have this flow from the heart, subsequent exchange with body tissues, with cells within those tissues, and then the blood returning to the heart to be replenished. Now the blood vessels traveling away from the heart we call arteries, and these arteries are how we get the nutrients to the cells. From the cells, we carry carbon dioxide and waste away. Now this flow back to the heart with waste like carbon dioxide and other stuff that we'll talk about in a minute is done through the veins, shown in blue here. In between these, the capillaries connect the veins and arteries together. And these are very small. Again, we talk about surface area that allows for the exchange of materials. Blood is composed of a bunch of different things, each with different roles. So the liquid part is called plasma, whereas the solid part is cells of various kinds. And we've talked about red blood cells already. They have hemoglobin within them, and that picks up oxygen. The red blood cells look like this. They look like sort of squished discs. We've also briefly talked about white blood cells fighting infection. So they'll destroy foreign materials, they'll attack it, and that's their basic function. We also call those white blood cells leukocytes. One thing we haven't mentioned previously is platelets. So platelets don't do anything until it comes time to work on dealing with an injury. So when we have a cut, we'll see blood clots that will help to stem the flow of blood so that we don't bleed out. Notice that platelets are pieces of cells, they're not cells themselves. All of this blood is moved around primarily by the heart. So, what is the heart? It's 4 chambers that we'll talk about in turn. The right atrium receives the blood carrying carbon dioxide from all parts of the body, and it passes it through a valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts, pumps the blood through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and that's where it gives up that carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen like we talked about previously. But then we still need to take that oxygenated blood and move it to the rest of the body. This is done by the blood coming from the lungs in the pulmonary vein into the left atrium and then through a valve into the left ventricle. And finally, the left ventricle contracts, the oxygen-rich blood pumps to the rest of the body. And we can, in fact, observe this pumping of the blood when we check our pulse. So the arteries are actually under pressure, and so they expand when the heart pumps, and we can feel this as our pulse, and you can check it in your wrist or in your throat. There's a whole separate system of vessels within the body called the lymphatic system. And we don't talk as much about that, but in fact it's very important for a couple of reasons. So it circulates a clear yellowy liquid called lymph, go figure, through the body. And lymph transports fats, but it also transports bacteria to the lymph nodes and the spleen, to critical components of your immune system. So if you have a bacterial infection, your lymph nodes become extremely important in terms of fighting that. And sometimes you'll notice when you're sick, you'll notice how you've got a swollen nodes in your throat. These are your lymph nodes, and when they're working hard, they may swell up. Okay, so that's our discussion of the circulatory system in brief today. Next, we'll do some activities around looking at the performance of that system. Thanks very much. Have a great night.